Well, as you can see, it's all quietened down a bit outside Carrow Road. Bit quieter now, isn't it? Norwich City winning here 1-0 against Birmingham, where I think probably need to use the context of what happened at Bristol City, Millwall a little bit, because what we had at Millwall was a complete lack of fight on the pitch. Hideously open team that were easy to play against, and 4-0 was probably to a degree a flattering scoreline on just how bad Norwich were. And a lot of people inside Carrow Road today would not have witnessed that full 90 minutes, so maybe wouldn't necessarily appreciate how much of an improvement this actually was in terms of Norwich's shape, which I did think played a big part in this. Norwich playing with two holding midfielders. Tom Trybull and Alex Tettey were an excellent pairing together. Lots of promise there. I really like the look of that. And in terms of what it offered Norwich in terms of protection, often when Birmingham were countering, that Norwich could sit in as two banks of four, and actually didn't seem particularly worried about possession necessarily, probably helped by the fact that they got ahead inside 5 minutes, which of course alters the dynamic of the game greatly. And Norwich did start well. They started on the front foot and they deserved their lead, so they instigated that as well. And a couple of times Norwich maybe looked a little bit vulnerable behind their fullbacks again, but actually in reality Norwich's defending was better because they were able to slow Birmingham up, and once Birmingham were slowed, it allowed Norwich to get back in shape and actually be difficult to break down. That said, they did invite it on at times in the second half. It got a little bit nervy. Norwich did create quite a few good looks on the counter and couldn't take them, which was a shame really, because they could have made life a lot easier for themselves, and they did have to give it a full 90 minutes, where you consider Burton are back down here on Tuesday night fresh from a 5-0 defeat at Leeds, and that will be a fascinating dynamic then, because that puts the expectation right back on Norwich. But in terms of, it's really good to see the adaptation and the change, and Norwich kind of curious. People will have picked up on this. The two games Russell Martin hasn't played in, Norwich have won. And the two times Norwich have actually finished second in terms of possession, they've won. Where the cause and effect lies in that is probably the biggest debate, and we'll have to see how things develop, of course. But ultimately, Norwich looked like a side that knew what they needed to do to win the game, and then did it, as opposed to looking wholly lost 2 weeks ago. So mentions for Tom Trybull, his first start in the Championship. For that, probably the right game in many ways. But there's nothing to say that Tuesday shouldn't be the right game for him either. Looked very good, very comfortable on the ball, used it so well, and sat very nicely alongside Alex Tettey, who I guess won't play on Tuesday night. But Alex broke play up, chased really well, and got himself in a muddle a couple of times, but did what Alex Tettey does so well. The defensive line, Tim Close, just been speaking to him actually, and he spoke about how he wants to have a leadership responsibility this season, and I think we could see the effects of that in terms of what he was doing on the pitch and how he was going about things. And really interesting attitude from Tim, speaking to him afterwards about what he wants to deliver this season, and that really does bode well, because you could see today he looked so comfortable, and he said how much he'd learned from last season. So as I said, it bodes well, and the next time he has a really big, powerful, bustling centre-half striker to deal with, we'll see how he comes out in that battle too. But him and Christoph Zimmermann looked like he did well off the back of that, and it may well be that Tim Closer is the guy that Norwich need to keep fit, which he doesn't have a great record of, but that Norwich can then slip Marcel Franco or Zimmermann next to him, and they can look more solid for the benefit of having Tim around. Marco Stiepermann did well at left back. That was a big choice as well, and quite a few big choices around the place. And in fact, this is probably the biggest win for Daniel Farke over anyone, because he's made some big calls today, and had it not have gone well, regardless of what was happening outside of the club, people inside of the club would have looked at that and gone, I'm not sure this is working. Even at this early stage, he's making big calls, and he needed them to come together, and they did today. We're not obviously going to get carried away. They really had to work hard for this against a Birmingham side that maybe in a few weeks' time, when they're a bit more cohesive, will be quite handy. Harry's got his players together, and this was the first time they'd had an outing together, and they looked a little lost maybe at times, but that certainly is what Daniel Farke needed. But of course it all ramps up again on Tuesday night when Burton are the visitors, and then Sheffield United will be a real test, because they are likely to just run over Norwich in a very similar way to what Millwall did. So plenty still to ponder and a long way to go, but at least we saw some positive signs coming out of things, which is exactly what we needed to see. A little word from Mario Vrancic as well, off the ball maybe still a bit of work to do, but when he is given time, picked out some glorious passes today, and you know, here's to seeing more of that if he has the right runners and legs around him to really show that off. But there we go, Norwich win here against Birmingham, 1-0, clean sheet. You know, what was the issue? Let's hope we don't remind ourselves.